Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today on our Jira Service Management demo. We're going to be covering pretty much everything Jira Service Management. This is going to be a long, comprehensive demo. We've got a lot to cover in our agenda, and I'm going to be laying out that agenda for you. So if you are already familiar with some of JSM, feel free to jump around the long video and jump to the parts that you are most concerned with. Obviously, Jira Service Management is Atlassian's cloud service management product. So we're going to be looking at a demo environment that is within the cloud, and there's going to be some cloud-specific visuals and information that is part of this demo. So for those of you looking at data center, you just keep that in mind. There's a feature comparison available on Atlassian's website as well. My name is Nick Nader. I'm the solution engineer here at ISO's Technology, and I have a range of certifications in the Atlassian toolset as well as an SPC safe consultant certification. Our agenda for today is, of course, around JSM. We're going to be starting with a very high level of what JSM is, where it lives within the cloud, what it looks like, how Jira, kind of as a core product, operates, and Jira Service Management being built on top of Jira Core. It is kind of an extension of it, so we'll be talking about that first. We'll then be moving on to the customer portal, that customer perspective of the tool, and other request intake options within JSM. We'll then move on to Jira Service Management's Jira Issue View, so what it looks like for those internal agents and what is packaged into that view that most people will be working out of when they are resolving and managing those issues coming in. We'll then move on to queues and request triaging. So how we kind of triage out those requests to different members of our team, maybe different support teams, how we hand that over to maybe Jira software teams or other people within the Atlassian system as well. We'll then move on to any out-of-the-box reporting Jira Service Management has, which is very related to SLAs and how we configure those service level agreements. So we'll be talking about those at the same time. We'll then move on to asset and configuration management, which is now packaged into that premium tier of Jira Service Management. So we'll get a full overview of that. I do have a separate asset management video on our YouTube as well. So if you're only concerned with that, definitely check out that 15-minute consumable version of that. We'll then move on to incident and change management, particularly pertaining to what is within Jira Service Management. OpsGenie is now a part of Jira Service Management, and a lot of that incident management functionality is going to come from OpsGenie, but we're not going to be covering the full OpsGenie product within this demo. So we're going to come out with a dedicated demo for OpsGenie in the future, so look out for that. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up with automation, so that full Jira automation engine and how we like to leverage that for Jira Service Management, and then the rest of kind of that project structure, those project settings, and how you can administer Jira Service Management as a JSM admin or help desk manager. Let's get to it. So first off, I wanted to basically do a high-level overview of what Jira Service Management is. Jira started as just Jira Core, and it was a task tracking, task management platform, and they then kind of extended that to Jira Software, and then further extended that to Jira Service Management. And the way that those three different Jira products are distinguished within the tool is with what they call a Jira project. And Jira projects aren't your traditional sense of a project. It doesn't have a start or an end date. It's really a section of the tool configured for a specific purpose, typically a specific team, and has its own configuration. It has its own project settings, and it has its own administration. So the project layer is a layer of administration within Jira that is a step down from your global Jira administration, which would actually encompass all three Jira products if you had licenses for all of them. Now, Jira Service Management is built with the foundation of Jira Core. So when we look at towards the end of this demo at the project structure, we'll get into how we kind of associate Jira configuration, global Jira configuration items like issue types, custom fields, workflows, all that stuff that goes into the configuration of the Jira projects and how that affects your service management project specifically. With that said, all three of the Jira products, if you do have multiple of them, all live within the same cloud environment. And creating projects for each of those different products is quite easy. They have a project creation wizard. And if we look at that project creation wizard, they have the project templates split up by use case as well as by those individual products. And so we can jump to something like Jira Service Management here and see the handful of different Jira Service Management templates that we have available to us. And these are really just a starting point. They will give you all the configuration items that you need. So if we look at our ITSM Service Management template here, we'll see that it comes out of the box with some things built into it, like a handful of service request types, things for incident management, problem management, change management, and even a new one for post-incident review, which are all going to be distinct forms and distinct issue types, of course, kind of following those ITIL best practices because this is the IT service management template. Now, of course, they have a handful of these templates, so if you're looking for something like HR or legal or a marketing help desk, you can, of course, leverage these other templates, which are going to be a little more simplified than the ITSM one, which is their most complex template out of the box. Of course, ISO's technology as an implementation partner will build these out very custom to your process. We can start with these, but we can also build them from scratch and make sure that all these configuration items and the entire project as a whole is built to really fit your process and customize to your team's unique needs. Now, with that said, navigating through several different projects within your Jira environment can seem daunting, but they do facilitate navigation within the cloud quite well for Jira now. So if we kind of look at this home page that we're on, this is essentially the landing page that anybody that has an internal license would see when they jump to your Jira environment. So all of your internal agents that are handling those tickets can come here and they can see recent projects that they have worked on, whether they be service management projects or software projects. So if they do have multiple licenses, they'll be able to look across all those projects and drill into what they want to very quickly. And then down here, you can see that they have several different tabs for subjective work as well. So I can very quickly jump back to anything that I've worked on recently, the most recent issue that I've touched, the most recent issue that I've viewed, or queue that I've viewed, or project that I've viewed, the most recent things assigned to me as well, split up by the status within their workflow here, so we can see the stuff that I have in progress, awaiting implementation that's just opened up for me, as well as a place for my starred and favorited areas of the tool, including dashboards, including queues, including projects, and filters. And we'll kind of talk about each of those individual items as we go through the demo as well. Now that is Jira Service Management at a very high level. We're going to be jumping over to the customer portal here next. So here in Jira Service Management's customer portal, we have an overarching Help Center URL, which we can send all of our customers or end users to. Jira Service Management is not just only used for customers of your organization, but also for internal users quite often. Here at ISO's Technology, we use it for our customer support help desk, as well as internal operations, internal HR, and internal marketing requests. So it can really have a range of use cases, and that's where splitting up JSM projects can be extremely helpful if you have different support teams supporting different services, supporting different customers, supporting different parts of your organization, or just have different distinct service catalogs of requests. Now, those projects are represented out here in the customer portal by these cards down here, and you can have some featured, you can have a lot listed here, frequently used, but the nice part is your customers and your end users can simply utilize the search bar if they don't know where to look for that request. Now, the first time they come here, they will have to create a username and login, and this is really global for the Atlassian Cloud account. So if they already have an Atlassian Cloud account, they will be able to just have that logged in and it'll be associated with the email address they have set up with Atlassian already. So it's a one and done, create a username, create a password, and they are perpetually signed in unless you have SSO set up, of course. Then they would have to authenticate anytime that you have your SSO ping them. Now, as a customer or an end user, I can come here and I can drill into the help desk that I would like to search the service catalog of, or I can utilize the search bar. So for example, if I'm having issues with the VPN that we have set up in the office, I can type in VPN and it will pop up with not only the request types from our help desk projects, but also articles from our knowledge base. And the knowledge base is empowered by the Confluence product. They actually have plans to have a knowledge base attached to the Jira Service Management license here by the end of the month, if I recall correctly. It's in beta currently, but I believe it hasn't been fully rolled out yet, so we'll see that coming here soon. And the nice part is once you invest some time in authoring those articles in your knowledge base, they can field, mitigate, and prevent a lot of those incoming requests that your users have of a lot of common problems. So if you have authors for troubleshooting, how-to articles, common solutions, FAQs, anything that you want to surface in documentation form to your end users and customers of your help desk, this is the place to do it. And the search bars across the customer portal are going to smart search the article title and the article body, so they'll have those relevant articles pop up for them. They can then, of course, read them in line like I am here. They don't have to leave the customer portal, go to Confluence. They'll be able to see that stuff here and read through it from here. And as you can see, it has a lot of content, and it can really have anything that you can put into a Confluence page. So if you're familiar with Confluence, it has a lot of different macros that give you things like navigation to other articles that can surface Jira content into the article, like these related issue lists that I have here. Not everybody wants to do that. Of course, you don't have to. But there are a lot of different macros available within Confluence, including macros from external tools that allow you to embed a lot of different dynamic content into these articles to help support your customers with a knowledge base. They can then, at the bottom, rate whether this article helped them and say, hey, we still need to raise a request, so let me click this and jump over to the help desk that this article is a part of and search that service catalog. So a lot of navigation tools that help them out there as well. Now, of course, if your customer or end user just blow right past that search bar, they can drill straight into the help desk. Maybe this is the URL that they just have bookmarked on their browser because they only enter IT requests. So they just come straight to here. And this is what is going to be representing your service catalog for your specific Jira Service Management project. So our ITSM project that we were looking at the very beginning, this is the service catalog in the customer portal for that project specifically. And we can always jump over to a different help desk service catalog like our HR service desk here and see HR related request forms. Now, with that said, the service catalogs can be quite simple like this, where there's only a handful of requests, and the forms are all each distinct forms. So if we look at something like give kudos, it's going to be very simple with just 2 fields that your end user needs to fill out. But if we back up and look at our ITSM service desk catalog here and some of our requests, we actually have so many requests that we group them into these nice logical buckets. And this is something that helps kind of navigate to the right request. So we've got common requests, computer related ones, so on and so forth. And we have distinct forms for each of these requests as well. Something simple like get IT help could just have a summary and a description field, maybe some optional attachment fields. And these are very, very configurable on the internal side, and we'll see that when we check out the project settings. But you can customize these very extensively. But they could be as simple as this, or they could be a little more complex, like our system change request form here, which we're actually using the pro forma form to create, which is to say, we're using a more dynamic form builder that Atlassian acquired and tied into the product recently. And this new form builder gives us a couple additional pieces of functionality. One is it makes it dynamic so that you can have things like this change type drop-down field create or spawn additional fields within your form depending on the value that we select within this dropdown. So if we have and we want to request a standard system change, then we can select standard here and we'll see this additional field that we need to fill out for our standard system changes. Whereas emergency changes would have different fields that we need to fill out, maybe additional pieces of information saying, hey, this is going to need to go through our change approval board for approval, and you'll need to add a specific approver to this as well. So we can create extremely dynamic, complex forms, especially for teams that are like HR teams that need a lot of information, or maybe additional forms throughout the request process. We can push these pro forma forms into the middle of your workflow as well, not just the beginning creation of a request. So it is very dynamic. The other nice part is We'll see here once we fill this out, we'll make up a use case here. We will select someone as the change owner and the change manager, and we'll also select a change reason, say that this is an upgrade. Add in a little more information, and we'll say that I'm approving this just so we can kind of see that approval process here. So once we send this in, we're going to see the customer's perspective of that request. The one major difference between having a pro forma form as your request type and just a normal out-of-the-box JSM request form is the customer will have the ability to edit the form after entering the request. So right now we're viewing the form, but we can go in and edit this form if we give them the permission to do so, as well as export this, download it into a PDF so we can save it or report on it later. Now, as you can see, all of the details that we entered into that form are going to be here in this center box. We also then have a full activity stream here at the bottom. This is where we're going to be able to communicate with that internal agent handling our request, add additional photos, files, anything that we need, as well as anything that happens on this request, so transitions through its workflow, so updating the status of the request, comments on it, attachments, anything that the agent does on that request on the internal side that they want to communicate out to the customer will appear here in the activity stream. And of course, a lot of those events on the request are also going to kick out email notifications to the customer so that they get those in email form and are aware of it. They can turn off those email notifications from here, as well as a couple other actionable buttons like escalating the request through its workflow if you want to surface that to customers, letting them close it out themselves if they maybe solved this with potentially a knowledge base article or something like that. So a couple of actionable buttons there, as well as sharing it out with other people that have access to this help desk. So an incident that is, pertains to several people in the office, you might want to share with all of them. This is a great way to kind of mitigate some of those duplicate incoming requests, as well as allowing them to share it out with other people. Now the status it's currently in is up here at the top right under status. So as we transition through the workflow on the internal side, the customer will of course see those status changes from here, and they can very quickly see where they're at in the process. Now, if you've been paying attention, you also might have caught that we have a little status update up here in the top. And this is actually the integration with another Atlassian product called Status Page, communicating back to the customer an ongoing incident. So this is another great way to mitigate some of those duplicate incident reports through your help desk, is having the communication feedback loop go through a status page, or you can manually put announcements out here in the help center to notify people of ongoing incidents as well. So that's a great integration with another of their tool, and we can open up the status page from here and see and subscribe to that ongoing incident. So if you're interested in status page, definitely check that out on Atlassian's website. Now, all of the requests are also housed out here in this top right dropdown. So as a logged in user, I will be able to see all of my past requests, all of my currently open requests, basically everything I've done and opened with the help desk. I can filter through these. I can look at those past closed ones. I can filter by the status that they're in. I can also sort these by these columns that I have. And as a customer, I can kind of customize which columns I'm concerned with. So if I don't really care about, update date or the agent that's working on it, I can change that and get rid of that in my list view here. Now up here in the top right, it can also house approvals. So if you do have internal users that need to approve requests, they actually don't need a license for Jira Service Management if the only thing they're doing is hitting approve or decline on those requests. So approvals can be managed by them exclusively out here from the customer portal. That way they can kind of drill in and see all of those approvals that they need to approve, as well as their approval history here. So when that change one hits that change approval board status on the internal side, it will show up in my approval list because I am that approver in that approver group, as long as we have that approver group configured properly. Now, the other thing that's showing up here in this top dropdown is what they call organizations, which allows you to basically aggregate your customers into different buckets. And this could be for end users, internal end users. It could be for different departments of your organization. It could be for different groups of customers that you service. And you can essentially define these organizations internally in the project configuration and then add users to it so that they then have the option to open up visibility of requests that they've opened up with your help desk to all of the other users in that organization. So another great way for visibility for things like incident reports. If I support, an office in Washington, D.C., and everybody in that office is having issues with their VPN, then one person can report that incident and then hit share with Washington office, and everybody in that office will have access to see that request. They can, add themselves to the notification scheme and get notifications via email about that incident to make sure that they are abreast of that incident resolution and when it is resolved. And then finally, we have some, if we back up to the Help Center, we have some look and feel customization, as well as a place to kind of customize the layout of this Help Center and service announcements. So as you can see here, we've got an upcoming maintenance announcement. This is something that I wrote in custom, and then I linked to our status page so that they can go see what is being maintained and when that is going to happen, and what kind of downtime there will be. So the announcement is very custom placed that you can post documentation, maybe post a new blog post to update customers. It's a great area to update customers en masse of something that's going on. You can also add a login message for when they're creating and logging into their account. In case there is an authentication issue, you could surface that information as well there before they even get logged in. And then finally, that look and feel customization, where you can customize our logo up in the top left here, background banner, the colors that we're utilizing, as well as each individual help desk has their own icon and branding as well. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention is there are a couple of other ways to intake requests into your JSM projects. The Help Center, the portal, the customer-facing portal is the best way because you can customize those forms, require fields. Your customers can see their requests and where they're at. They can add more information easily. They can filter through them. All that functionality that we just saw is very valuable to customers, but not everybody likes to operate out of a customer portal. So they do have an email handler for each of your Jira Service Management projects. So we can have an IT help desk email handler here, as well as one for our HR service desk, for our facilities, for our legal, each of them having their own custom email address, or you can add your own email address from any other platform to handle those incoming emails. Now, when they send an email in, they will get automatic replies and notifications about that request that has been created. By default, you will also, the customer will also basically get a templated response that says, hey, go check this out in the portal. It'll usher them towards that portal to create a login for that traceability and visibility. But you can completely customize that email template that gets sent out for customer notifications. So not just for the email handler notifications, but for notifications for any customer that opens up a request. You can customize this with HTML, CSS, and you can embed variables from your Jira environment into the subject and body of those emails to communicate out more information to those users. And you can actually customize this template for each and every event that gets kicked out to a customer. So as you can see, these are the default notification events when they get invited to the portal, when they open up a request, they'll get an email, when they add a comment, like everything that happens on that request, they'll essentially get an email about, and you can edit the template for each of these individual events that get kicked out. Now, other than the email handler and the customer portal, there's also a widget that you can embed into external websites. So you can configure a widget to make sure that you can collect requests from maybe your main website or other websites that your customers visit. The one thing I will mention here is it is limited to a single request type, as is the email handler, right? The emails are limited to the subject and body as fields, so you can't collect as much information. The widget is limited to a single request type as well. So we're creating maybe an email request every time an email is entered. The widget is creating a specific type of request that you get to select every time they enter information through this nice little widget form. So you'll usually select something generic like get IT help and then triage it from there after they've opened up that request. And you can actually allow them to search knowledge base articles from the widget, as well as search for all of those different request types. So you do have the option of opening this up and saying, hey, let me have the customers be able to open up multiple different types of requests. So the Jira Issue View, we can see that the request that we just opened up from the customer's perspective about upgrading our Amazon operating system is right here at the top of our queue. We'll talk about queues in the next section, but to drill into this issue, I'm simply going to click on it and get to that Jira Issue View that we see here. Each Jira issue is going to have its own distinct identifier. This one is ITHD201, meaning it's part of our IT help desk project within Jira, and it's the 201st request that we've opened up within the project. So you can always utilize that unique identifier to find or link this request. It's actually the way that you embed it into Confluence articles as well, if that's how you'd like to do it. Now, this request view, or this Jira issue view rather, has all the information that we put into that pro forma form down here in the forms section. And this operates slightly differently than a normal Jira issue view. If we were to take a look at one of our other Jira issues here, like I need help setting up a VPN, we'll see that the information is actually here in this center panel, and we actually have an asset management asset here attached to it. But since we opened up a request utilizing the pro forma forms, it's actually in this forms section because it allows you to add additional forms in the center, in the middle of the process, like I mentioned before, and it's just in a dedicated area within the tool, right? So this is a dedicated form that we could have them like reopen. So say, hey, let's give them the ability to edit. We need more information, or they need to update the information. So let's open it up to them. We can also utilize forms as internal forms as well. So if the agent needs to fill out forms as part of the process, you can definitely utilize forms for that. And you can have as many forms as you'd like attached to a request. That's the other benefit of creating pro forma forms, is you can have 4 different forms. Maybe part of your change management process is your agent filling out a change management form on the internal side after the request is filled out. That can always be attached as part of that process. Now down here at the bottom, we also have an activity stream, just like the customer did, but this one has a dual comment stream for not only replying to the customer with a full editor here, but also adding internal notes away from the customer's eyes. So this is a great way to work in collaboration with Jira software users or other JSM agents. It works across products within Jira. So even if a user is a Jira software user, maybe a developer, and we need their help implementing this change, fixing or upgrading that operating system, we can mention them. They can still see the comments. They can still comment on these requests, and they can still see all of the information around this Jira issue. The major difference between Jira software and Jira work management licenses and your JSM agent licenses is going to be your agent's ability to transition through the workflow and change and edit the fields and the forms fields here on the Jira issue. And of course, be able to view those SLA goals and timers up here as well. So it makes it very distinct, but it also gives the ability for those other Jira licensed users to still collaborate over this work that originates from your customers in your JSM projects. So if I need Mitch's help here, because he's a developer on our team that does these operating system upgrades, we can say, hey, Mitch, we are going to need you to work on this one after it is approved. So we're just giving him this information preemptively so that he is aware of it and he can review it and prepare for it. And you'll see that's clearly denoted as an internal note. It's got that yellow background, as opposed to replying to the customer will not have those things, and you'll know it'll go out to the customer themselves. Now, with that said, passing work to other members within your Jira environment, maybe Jira software users or Jira software projects, is something that we can kind of build into the workflows. And utilize the automation engine to automate part of that process. So when we hit a specific part of our workflow, so if we go to implementing immediately, then we need to generate a Jira software story for our developers to actually implement that change. That status can trigger an automation rule that then generates that issue and links it to this originating issue. And the way that works is with this linked issue field, and it's something that we can also do manually here. So as an agent, I can say, hey, this relates to another change management issue, or this relates to something that our software development team is already doing. And I can search through our issues and connect it to something that is already happening, an already existing Jira issue. And I can connect and link as many Jira issues as I would like, as well as create new Jira issues to link to this one. And this is how we handle a lot of things within Jira Service Management that have cross-project workflows that maybe transition into different issue types. So if you think about ITIL best practices, typically an incident is reported by a customer, you do incident resolution, and as you step through that incident resolution workflow, part of that is root cause analysis, which would generate a problem issue. And so what we can do as part of that process is create and link a problem issue to our originating incident within the same project, but so that we can work on that problem issue distinctly and still have that hard link between those issues. And so as you can see, it passes information when we create that linked issue. And so that problem issue has a lot of that same information, and we can of course customize that information as we're linking it or through that automation rule. Now we can also do the same thing as we move from problem to change, as we identify that root cause and decide what change needs to be made to fix and remedy that root cause. We can make that part of the process, and we can link that change issue here as well. This is also a great way to link related incidents to each other and say, hey, these relate to each other, or these blocking each other. You can customize this linked issue relationship that we have over here on the left-hand side as well. So any duplicate issues, you can say, hey, this was duplicated. These are the same thing, and then you can delete one of them or archive one of them. And you can also say, hey, let's merge them together. Let's just have them linked, and let's push one into a resolved state. So a lot of uses for this linked issue field. It is also where we link Confluence documentation. So if you do want to link a Confluence page or document, then you can do that from here as well. Now back down here at the bottom, next to our comment stream, we also have a full history audit log. So everything that happens on this issue we can see. So we can see when the fields were filled out. We can see that I changed the summary here. We can see that I updated and linked multiple issues to our change management request here. And up here in the top right, where I'm looking at the current status that we're in, we can view the full workflow, but we can also transition through this workflow. So we can say, hey, let's get this ready for approval. We're ready. Let's push this in the approval stage. The approval will pop up here. We can add the approver if it isn't automatically added. This can, of course, be automated so that it just grabs a group of users for that approval, and you can customize, hey, we need 1 or 2 or 5 out of our 10 change approval board users to approve this. So the approval process can be very, very automated. I just did it manually just to demonstrate how that works. And then we can see down here very quickly, since we transitioned through our workflow and added an approver, those steps are in our audit log. So you can see who did it, when they done it, what they did, and then you can start blaming your coworkers when your issues go awry. Now up here in the top right, we of course just saw that workflow, saw the transitions that we're allowed to move through. And workflows within Jira are what make those issue types extremely distinct. And these are very, very customizable. So this is the out-of-the-box change management workflow that we have for this project. Our HR service desk would probably have entirely different workflows for HR requests. Our service requests, our incidents, our problems are all going to have distinct workflows because that's what makes them distinct Jira issue types, because we work them and resolve them in different ways. So this will match your process. We can create these custom workflows to facilitate your process, automate your process, and in conjunction with automation rules, make sure it works for you, and we eliminate as much of that manual work as possible. So things like automatic triggers between our statuses and our transitions here. And that's what really makes up a workflow, right? You have the status that the work is in and the transitions in order to transition through those different statuses. So as you can see, when our change management issue is created, it drops into review. We do that review step, and then we move into planning, or we move into the authorization phase like we did, or we jump around to a lot of different areas. And so these transitions are something that we can do automatically and trigger automatically, but we can also set things like conditions and validators so that conditions have to be met or values have to be validated before we can transition. So a little bit of gatekeeping around those transitions, as well as post functions. So those automatic actions that happen after we've entered a status and we need to take automatically. Now the approval is right below that. So as the approver that I added to that approval field, I can approve or decline this from the internal side. But as I mentioned earlier, this is also going to be pushed out to the customer portal as an approver. So I can look at my waiting for approval out here. So if I don't have an internal Jira license, maybe I'm just a stakeholder or a change approval board member, and I don't have to deal with Jira whatsoever other than approvals, I can always manage them out here from the customer portal as well as through email and just hit that button in an email and say, hey, I'm good with this. I see the form, I see the information, I see who's requesting it. Let me approve this. And the nice part is this is also part of the automated process. Once I hit approve, it should automatically transition the status into the stage that I have selected to go to after approving, as well as declining. So declining the request, it'll automatically transition it through that status. So let's make sure this works properly. So we clicked approve and we can see that it's now moved that status into awaiting implementation. And if we jump back to the internal side here and refresh real quick, we'll see that approver box is gone because it's already been approved and the status has been transitioned into awaiting implementation. Now, right below that, we have our SLA goals and timers, and we'll talk about the configuration of this when we jump to the reporting section. But this is what it looks like on the Jira Issue View, and these automatically start counting down when you set them to. You can set when they start, stop, and pause, and these are very, very distinct based off of which requests they're associated with. So there's a full underlying filtering and query system within Jira that we'll talk about in the next section on queues. But just keep in mind that that underlies the SLAs, and we'll see that here when we look at the SLA configuration. But this is to keep your agents on track. We've got a time to resolution for change issues of 24 hours, so we like to resolve those changes within 24 hours. That's pretty quick. These are obviously very customizable, but this is going to be very different than something like our time to resolution for our incidents that are being reported, which is most likely going to be much shorter than for our change management issues. Now, right below that, we have the full details panel. So as we work on this issue, we of course need to assign it out. Maybe Alana is the one handling this. The assignee could be automatic for the request type. It could be based off of the status that we transition to. So when we hit implementing and it gets handed off to that dev team, maybe we assign it to a dev team member, or we just keep it on the agent's plate because we have this linked issue over in the dev environment that is assigned out to an individual user as well. So this details panel is really for all of the fields that you don't surface to those customers, but your internal agents need to see or be able to edit. So I can go in and change the priority of this change as an agent very easily and quickly. And we can say, hey, this is a major blocker. We need to update Amazon's operating system. We utilize it. It's business critical. So we're going to make this a blocker priority. I can, of course, search and create knowledge-based articles from here via that Confluence integration as well. So if we need to author change management, or we need to surface this change and maybe publish a blog post or something like that in our knowledge base, we can do that from the issue view as well. Very, very customizable, this whole section. Now, we can also create subtasks within and underneath of our requests. And this is a layer of Jira issue beneath your standard issue layer. So incidents, problems, changes, service requests, those are all standard Jira issue types. And the subtask layer is below that so that we can create child-dependent tasks, essentially. So if we need to take some actions on this change management request, like review the change, maybe get cab approval and present to the board or something like that, and then run through dev team planning process, making stuff up on the fly. But as you can see, it creates a distinct Jira subtask issue for each of these subtasks that we create. So it operates just like any other Jira issue. It's got its own Jira Issue View. It's got its own fields associated with it. It's got its own workflow that we work through for subtasks that you can customize yourself. And it's got its own assignee, most importantly. The assignee field is linear within Jira. You can only have one user in that assignee field. And so if your agent is that user on the parent issue, but reviewing the change is someone else's job, we can assign this subtask out to somebody like me, or maybe like Mitch here, or somebody else on the support team, so that they can take their actions and do these tasks in parallel, right? So what we'll typically do is we'll create workflow statuses for those sequential actions that need to happen on the request. And we'll create subtasks, and we can also automate the creation of these subtasks for all of the parallel things that need to happen on your request. So that's kind of how we break it up, and we can create these, with an automation rule for every incident that comes in, or maybe every one that's approved. We can generate these at any part of the process, and we can create as many as you would like. Now, the notification scheme is up here in the top right. So the in-app notifications happen in this bell in the top right. So agents, the assignee of that issue, is going to get those notifications, just like the reporter, that customer is going to get notifications. They happen in-app and via email. The individual user can kind of customize how they get those notifications, but the help desk project settings also can customize which events kick out notifications to the assignee. If you're not the assignee, but you still need to be notified about an issue, so maybe like a major incident that the help desk manager wants to be notified about, they can always utilize the watch option as well. So you can add watchers, you can start watching issues. That essentially means, hey, I want to get those notifications just like the assignee is getting them as well. You can vote for things within here, and you can also share these out with other help desk team members or something like that. And you've got some other actions here like exporting them, moving them to a different project in case somebody entered a request in the wrong place, cloning them if you need to duplicate it, and of course straight up deleting that issue. So now that we've looked at the Jira Issue View, let's talk about how we triage and manage these incoming requests as a help desk team. And we do that with what we call queues here in JSM projects. And the queue system, if anybody watching is familiar with Jira as a whole, Jira software, Jira work management, then you should probably know about the filtering system that Jira has. You can see it up here in the top where it says filters. I have my own favorited filters. And this is essentially a querying system that allows you to grab list views, so like a view of a full list of issues based off of criteria and filters that you have set. And this is essentially what the queue system is, but for JSM projects. So it's the filter system, but at that project level for your specific help desk project. So our ITSM help desk has its own set of queues, and for example, our HR service desk also has its own set of queues here that are completely distinct and different for our HR requests. Now, the ITSM template that we used for this project does have additional functionality around here because it breaks up the queues by ITIL component. So as we can see, we've got service request queues, incident queues, problem queues, change queues, post-incident review queues, as well as just queues for kind of any generic queue that you want. So we can basically group and create queues within our different ITIL component groups of queues here. So if we drill into our normal queues here, we can see that we've got start and favorited queues, team priority queues. So there's some management of those queues. And these queues are very easy to create as well. Your whole team is going to be able to see the queues. So anybody that has access to the help desk project, there's a whole permission scheme that goes into project administration within Jira. But if you do want to lock down these queues even further and say, hey, we only want a specific subset of our IT help desk agents to see high priority incidents or change management issues, there are apps on the marketplace that facilitate more queue functionality that allow you to kind of reduce visibility and toggle visibility of those queues and group them and get subjective views of queues. Now, with that said, the out-of-the-box queue functionality is just like that global filtering system. You'll see that it says filter by, this queue is already filtered by our ITSM help desk project. And that's really the big difference between filters and queues. Filters are global across all of your Jira projects, and you can have issues aggregated within a filter from all or several of your Jira projects. Whereas a queue within your JSM project is specific to the requests in that JSM project. And then we can further filter those issues coming in. So right now, it's really all of our issues within our JSM project. But we could specify the issue type. So we can say, hey, let me look at all of those internal tasks, or let me look at all those change management issues, or incidents, or problems. We even have subtasks available here. So let me look at all those subtask dependent tasks that we have. So as an example, I'll use just normal service requests, maybe service requests with approvals as well, because they're kind of packaged in there. And so I'll select those two different issue types, and then I can select the status that they're in their workflow. So maybe the ones waiting on us, waiting on support. That makes a lot of sense. And then I can select a resolution state, so this is always checked unresolved because we don't usually look at the stuff that's already complete in these queues, but I can always uncheck that and look at some of the resolved states as well. And again, this is really opened up to all of the fields, all of the criteria that you have within your Jira environment, system default fields, custom fields that you've created, those pro forma form fields. We can utilize all of those as filters. So we can say, hey, let me grab that change type and specify, emergency or major or normal change for this queue. Or let me grab the priority field, right? And let me specify only those highest priority issues within this queue. And it'll start to filter out the stuff that doesn't meet that criteria. Now, once you have this queue set up for the issues that you'd like to see in it, you can also customize the information about those issues that you're seeing within this queue. So all of these columns are also fields with their values. So we can say, hey, priority is of concern. Let us grab priority as one of those columns, drag it over here to the left, and then we can start sorting by that priority once we've saved this queue. This can happen again with all of your different Jira fields. Maybe we're concerned with the reporter details, or maybe we are concerned with the approver or the approver group. All of these can then be columns that you see information in. Now, once we've got this queue set how we want it to, we can save it. Probably already have this queue. Hopefully I named it something different though. There we go. So once you have this queue configured, it lives over here on the left-hand side. I've got a lot of queues in my demo environment, but as a subjective agent, I can star the ones that I'm most concerned with. So I can star that queue that I just created, and it can pop up here at the top because those are the ones that I'm managing. And if you recall from the beginning of the demo, that is going to show up in my Your Work home landing page as well as this dropdown. So my favorite queues are here, and I can very quickly drill into that one that I just favorited. You have ability to edit issues from the queue as well. You can edit the assignee field. So if Alana's not the one handling this issue, but I am, I can very quickly reassign it. I can also transition these through the status. So if we're waiting on the customer for this one, I can transition it. Sometimes this will pop up with a transition screen and we can say, hey, you need to add more information. Thanks. Send that out as we transition it. And this is, since this is waiting on customer, will disappear from this queue because it is not waiting for support. And that was one of our criteria. So now it's gone out of our queue, somebody else's problem, and we'll wait for the customer to then add a comment and it'll automatically transition it back to waiting for support. Now you can also take bulk actions from these queues. So you can mass comment, mass link, mass assign, transition, approve, delete. So you can take some bulk actions. If you need further bulk actions like editing the priority of a bunch of issues or really editing any of the fields of a bunch of issues, you can do that through the global filtering system as well. But they wanted to give you some quick bulk action edits that happen quite often here within the queues. And of course, you can clone and delete these queues as well. So we briefly saw what SLAs look like on that Jira issue view for agents when they're actually working on that issue. And here in the project settings is where we're going to be able to configure those SLAs for our project and our help desk as a whole. So as you can see, our service level agreements out of the box are time to resolution, time to first response, time to close after resolution, some very popular ones that come with that template. But you can have as many of these service level agreements as you would like to help track metrics alongside of those requests and to keep your agents on track and responding to those requests coming in from your end users. And if we go into the configuration of one of these SLAs, we'll see that we have basically two main sections here. We have the goals, which are going to be your timer goals, the calendars that they automatically pause against, and then the issues that they're associated with utilizing the Jira query language, so that filtering system that we talked about briefly. So if we go in to edit this, we'll see that we can easily add additional time goals. But just to look at the ones that we currently have, we have a 4-hour time to resolution goal against incidents and an 8-hour time to resolution goal against service requests, whereas we've got a full 24-hour time to resolution goal for changes.
And this is the Jira query language, so it can get as granular as those filters, as those queues we just saw. So if you can imagine, you can associate these SLA timers with specific clients' requests, organizations of those clients' requests, based off of priority, based off of severity and impact of your incidents. Really, any of that criteria that you're utilizing within your Jira environment and associated with your issues can then be utilized to say, hey, we want this timer with all of those requests coming in. And these are calendars that we base those timers off of. That way, when your agents aren't actually on call working, those SLAs are not counting down and counting against them. And this is something that you can configure yourself. You can have as many calendars as you would like. So you could have it counting down 24/7 if you want to. And you can also build in holiday schedules and time zones into those calendars. So as you can see, this is based off of an East Coast time zone and a 5-day a week, 8-hour a day work week. We can add as many of these calendars as we want in case we do have multiple support teams in multiple different locations across the globe. We can also add holidays, so we can have different holiday schedules for those different countries that we have support desk agents in. So once you have your calendars configured and you set your goals and associate them to the specific issues you want them associated with, you do have a catch-all where you can have a base target for all of the remaining issues that you didn't specify, so it makes it easier to configure. And then down here in the conditions section, we're going to set explicitly when those timers are going to start, when they're going to stop, and when they're going to pause as well. Additionally, they of course pause based off of those calendars that we have configured, but these are basically additional conditions to say, hey, we're going to pause this when we're waiting on the customer, right? So if we need more information from the customer, we don't want to count that against our agent, especially when customers take 3 days to respond to our questions and our comments. It's going to pause that based off of the status waiting for customer. And most of these conditions are going to be based off of status. So, when the issue is created, it's going to start that calendar. We're going to pause it when we're waiting on customer, and we're going to stop it when we set that resolution and mark it as done. And as you can see here, it can be stopped based off of a comment by the customer, based off of it being unassigned. But most of these are going to be around statuses within our workflows. Now, SLAs are super important because they do underlie the vast majority of the reporting that comes out of the box with Jira Service Management. We have a handful of static reports like this workload one that shows issues in progress for each of our agents and how many of them have breached their SLAs. There's a satisfaction question that gets sent out when you resolve issues, and you can kind of see a roll-up of that. And then also knowledge-based deflected and resolved requests, which is a little iffy, right? It's based off of a thumbs up or thumbs down on that article that we saw out in the customer portal. So if we look at that VPN article again real quick, we can see that at the very bottom of this article, there is a did this article help? And then you can hit a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And then you can also, raise a request if you do need to raise a request. So that's basically how they determine whether you deflected requests with those knowledge-based articles, is they gave you a thumbs up and then didn't open a request afterwards. Now, those aren't the most important ones, though. The most important ones are going to be down here in the custom section. And most of these custom ones are going to be based off of those SLA timers. The one exception is the created and the resolved metrics. And this is kind of like normal Jira issue reporting. So if you're familiar with Jira software, it's just like the created resolved report over in Jira software, where you can see in totality for your project how many issues were created versus how many issues were resolved. And we've got that in our red line here and our green line here. But we can also specify which types of issues we're extrapolating in this line graph, right? So we can say, hey, let's look at our high priority incidents that were created versus our high priority incidents that were resolved, right? And we can label those, and we can add additional lines with additional colors. That way we can see those on top of each other within the same graph. For any of these custom reports, you're going to be able to drill into any time range. So the past couple days, the past week, month, quarter, by week, also year by month like we're looking at right now. So very easy and totally live data. So I don't really have to change this report after I've configured it initially. Now, created versus resolved are two metrics that can layer on top of each other within a report. For your SLAs, you're going to have 4 different types of metrics for your SLAs. You're going to have the average time it takes to meet that SLA, which is what we're looking at here for time to first response. You're also going to have the percent of those issues that have met their SLA. You're going to have the number that have met their SLA and the number that have breached their SLA. And met and breached are going to work very similar to created versus resolved, where you can layer them on top of each other within the same line graph. So if we look at our met versus breached for our incidents over the past year, you can see that we breach our incident SLA quite often here within our demo environment. Now for these, once you have them configured, they're all live data, so you can also drill into the points on that graph. We can look at the high priority incidents, time to first response average, and down here it'll show which incidents are actually being extrapolated within that point on the graph, and you can see those SLA timers and how long elapsed for us to first respond to them. And configuring and creating these are relatively easy as well, because you already have those SLAs configured in your project settings. So if we want to create a new report, and we can say this is going to be our demo report, we just hit add series up here in the top right, and then we select which metric we want from our different SLAs. And as you can see here, we've got the average, percent met, number breached, and number met. So if we're looking at time to resolution, percent met, then we can grab that metric. We can say this is time to resolution, percent met for service requests. So we'll label that, we'll make this orange, and then we can grab the already configured filter for our time to resolution SLA. So these are those goals and timers we just saw on that time to resolution SLA within our project settings. So we already know that this SLA is being associated with incidents, being associated with service requests, and being associated with changes. So those are the most likely types of issues that we're going to grab to put into this graph. So we can grab our service request timer, which is 8 hours here, and it is going to extrapolate all of the service requests into our graph in this orange line. So if we add that here, we're going to have to drill back in time to see some of that data there. But we can also layer on top of this one, right? And we can get more specific with which types of issues we're pushing into this graph. So we don't have to utilize those JQLs from our SLA goal. We can specify more granularly, and we can say, hey, let's look at the highest priority service requests and compare those to all of our service requests. And we can see if we're resolving high priority ones faster than we're resolving normal service requests, right? And we can say, hey, this is time to first response, percent met for high prio service requests. And we'll make this purple. And then once we create this and move back in time, hopefully we'll see some nice data. And we can see back in June, we were meeting our 100% of our service requests, but we met 0% of our priority ones. So we're not doing that well. And here in July, we met our normal service requests and our high priority service requests at the same rate. So maybe we need to prioritize better or assign different priorities to our service requests. So these are very, very powerful reports that you create once and then further evolve and configure as you want to change them. But you can always drill back in time, and it's live data, so it's going to flow from today back into time as far as you would like. Now, these reports can also be aggregated onto dashboards here within Jira. The dashboarding feature works across all of the Jira products, so not just Jira Service Management, but Jira Software, Jira Work Management, and you can actually aggregate data from all of those different projects, so your software projects and your service management projects in one place. And you can utilize global filters for that, or you can just grab issue reporting from a software project and from a service management project. So we can see here we're looking at that time to first response average from our ITSM help desk. And then we're also looking at a filtered list of change management issues. And then we've got an add-on Easy BI for business intelligence reporting here. So this is also supplemented by some of the add-ons from the marketplace. We have a lot of different graphical formats that we can push different issue data into, like this line graph here, as well as the pie chart here. And these are very easy to edit. You go into the edit form and you have a nice list of gadgets over here on the right-hand side that you can simply add and then select a filter or project for the issues you want to extrapolate into that graphical format. And there are 65 different gadgets here in our demo environment. Some of them are coming from add-ons like Easy BI, like I showed down here in this report. So you do have a lot of apps from the marketplace that supplement these gadgets and give you more reports because they are reporting tools, or they add additional data like tempo timesheets, as well as structure by ALM works. These all have different gadgets that you can add on to your dashboard as well. So very easy to configure and edit these dashboards, and they can be public, facing as well. So you can surface your SLA reporting to your customers. So you could have a customer specific dashboard, create JSM SLA reports based off of that customer, and then show them, hey, we're meeting all of our SLAs for all of the requests that you've entered, over the past year. And maybe we meet it 99% of the time, or maybe we need it 80% of the time, and we need to work on it. So you can surface that information to the public internet, and those dashboards are going to have their own permissions when you go to create them. So if we were to add a new dashboard here, you'll see that you can edit, or you can you can select who can view that and select who can edit that dashboard, and you can make that totally public. Just keep in mind that anyone that has that URL can see that public dashboard. So don't surface any of that issue data you don't want to share with the internet as a whole.
So Insight Asset Management was acquired by Atlassian earlier this year, and they've now tied it into the premium tier of their Jira Service Management product. So if you have that premium tier license, you get all of this Insight Asset Management functionality. It has its own little drop down up here in the top. It used to be a third-party vendor app on the marketplace, so it'll also reside still in that marketplace, but it comes with that premium tier. And it's structured and was developed similar to the structure kind of Jira projects and issue types. You have object schemas, and you can define as many object schemas within the Insight tool as you would like. Here we have hardware and software object schemas, so it is often marketed for kind of hardware devices as well as software configuration items. But those aren't the only use cases. We've seen this used to map your entire Jira configuration and kind of see a hierarchical structure of that Jira configuration and be able to manage that. We've also seen it used in higher education and universities, mapping things like student and faculty, or just organizations mapping their internal organizational structure. So showing, what employees report to what managers and what those direct reports look like. And we can then use that in things like the approval schemes within your workflows. Now, over here on our left-hand side, we have that hierarchical structure, that basically tree of different objects, and each one of these different objects is an object type that we've defined within our object schema. So you can define those object types quite easily. You do that by defining their name, an icon, and whether they're a parent or a child of another object type. And then once you've done that, you go into the object type, like our laptops object here, and you define what they call attributes. And these are essentially all the criteria surrounding that specific object type. And you can think of these kind of like, Jira issue fields. And then the object types are kind of like Jira issues, and the object schema are kind of like Jira projects. So once we've defined our, laptops object here, we'll define it even further with all of these attributes, and they have several different attribute types. The default attribute type is going to include a lot of your values here, from booleans to IP addresses and dates. And then they have some other unique attribute types like other objects, and this is going to be where you're able to reference and create dependencies between the different object types within your schema. This is where we've pointed our laptops towards the other objects like manufacturer and operating system, so we can say, hey, this laptop is running this specific operating system, Windows 7. And since it's a Lenovo, it's pointing at the Lenovo manufacturer. So we can kind of define the relationships between those different objects, and we can even create specific references between those objects over here in the additional values column. We can define custom references. So we have these as technical references, you can have financial references. You can define these however you'd like, and then have a color coordination for them as well. So that's the object attribute type. And then we also have user and group attribute types. This is how you kind of associate assets with specific Jira users. The user field allows you to grab users from, your entire Atlassian Access, user management system. So you can pull them, from that LDAP directory that's synced with Atlassian Access. You'll basically have the ability to associate assets with any of the users within your Jira instance. Same goes for groups, except it's groups of users. And then the status attribute is a custom attribute as well, where you can define custom statuses that are on those specific objects. So if we jump back to our laptop objects here in this nice list view, we can see that this one has an assigned status, so we know it's assigned out to somebody, and we can see that that somebody is Mitch Davis here. So this is kind of like the Jira Issue View. So this object view is going to show you, all of your laptop objects. If we're clicked on laptops, and we can drill through each of the laptop objects, we can see all of the details, so all of those attribute values here in the details panel. Right below that, we have a full activity stream, so we can see everything that's happening, associated with that actual object. And then over here on the right-hand side, we've got some dates, inbound references, which you'll see over here on our manufacturers is showing, when objects are pointing at this specific object. So Apple is getting pointed at by 4 different laptops, and we can very quickly see, we have 4 different MacBooks that we have defined and are pointing at the Apple manufacturer. If we jump back to laptops here real quick, we can also drill into maybe this one, I believe, has connected Jira issues as well. So down here in the bottom right, this will show all of the issues that have been opened up against this asset as well. And the way we really do that is we push these different object types into custom fields within Jira. So we do that at the Jira administration level. There is a custom field type called Insight Object, which I'll show here in a second, that allows us to push and define dynamically which objects we would like in that custom field and then be shown within that custom field kind of as a drop down. And that's kind of how we service them all the way to customers of our help desks and things like that, which we'll show here in the demo. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here before we jump over to kind of that configuration is you can also see the dependencies of your entire object schema here in this graph view. So you can see all those references. You can see the dependencies and the connections between all of your objects here. And you can move them around and see that, hey, these are the technical references, whereas these are links, and maybe we've got financial dependencies between some of these, depending on what we've defined as those custom references. You can also do this at the object level, so we can always look at the laptops graph and how laptops connect to all of our different objects, or we can look at the specific objects object graph, and we can see how this Lenovo ThinkPad is connected and what it references and what operating system it's running and everything like that. Now, the way that we push these into custom fields, like I mentioned a second ago, is utilizing a specific custom field type. So if we look at our laptop's custom field here, we will see that the type is an Insight Objects type. So all you have to do when you're creating a custom field is go to all here and then type in Insight, and you'll see the Insight Objects custom field type here. So you'll select that one, and then once you've defined the name of it, you'll come in and go to contexts and default value. And this is where you're able to specify exactly what objects you want to push into this custom field. Insight created their own query language, just like the Jira query language, called Insight Query Language, of course. And this is where we can define our object type as all of our laptops. So we can get more granular with this, and we can say, hey, let's grab all of our laptop object types that are also assigned to the current user. So we could add, assigned user, which I believe is the attribute, equals current user, like this. And if we were then to save this, it would dynamically show only the laptops that are associated with the currently logged in user. So we can very granularly and dynamically surface these different objects within custom fields to things like those forms on your help desk portal, so that when a user logs in and they click that drop down that says laptops, they'll only see the laptops that they have on their desk right now that are associated with their user. So it's great for provisioning out laptops. It's great for employees that already have devices that maybe want upgrades or having an issue with their laptop, and they need to open up a help desk request against that specific asset. There's also a couple other configuration items here, as you can see, so you can get pretty granular with how we surface these in the custom fields. Now, to go over to that use case, from the customer portal, we then just essentially add that custom field, to our different request types. So if we drill into our IT help desk requests here and we go to get IT help, we'll see that laptops field is here within this form. So if we're having an issue with our Lenovo laptop, my Lenovo ThinkPad won't update its operating system. I think it is running Windows 7. Oh, if I can find the 7 key. We'll say we're having problems getting it updated to the latest version. And then we'll get this nice drop down of all of our laptops within our asset database. And you can surface these with different information. I don't know if you guys caught that real quick here in the configuration screen. But you can say, hey, let's show the name, status, and the assigned user for all of these objects within that drop down. Or let's show additional things. So when you're searching it, and we look in this drop down, we can see, hey, this one's assigned and it's assigned out to Mitch Davis, or this one's assigned and assigned out to me, and I'll know this is my Lenovo ThinkPad. So we can either dynamically surface it for the logged in user, or we can just surface a lot of those attributes and information surrounding those objects so the users know exactly which object they need to grab. And then once we send that in, we'll of course see that external customer view of the request. What I want to do is drill into the internal side of that request, though, and show that agent view and what they're going to see now that we've attached a laptop to this request. So we have that internal issue view here. Everybody should be familiar with this if you've seen Jira. It looks like any other Jira issue, but we now have this insight object laptop attached in this laptop's field, and we can very quickly hit this nice caret, and we can see all of those attributes surrounding that laptop. We can see that it is running Microsoft Windows 7 Professional. Maybe we drill over into that operating system and we see things surrounding, that object because it's another object defined within our schema. Or maybe we want to look at everything that's connected to the specific laptop that's in question. So we can very quickly see that graph here. We can even drill into all of its past requests. So it looks like there's been a lot of things opened up against this laptop. So maybe we need to drill into one of those past requests and see if it was resolved or see if it caused this issue as well. So we can see kind of everything surrounding that specific object here within the issue view. We can also add additional objects if we would like to here within Jira Issue View if we're an agent and maybe we need to attach the operating system object or something like that to the issue. We can always do that as well. So it goes all the way from that customer portal to the internal Jira Issue View, and it's all populating from that original database that we showed here. Now, we can also do some things within the object schema view here, like filter through all of our objects, based off of the attributes themselves. So maybe by status, we want to see all of the assigned attribute or assigned laptops that are assigned out, or maybe we want to look at all the ones that need maintenance or something like that. So if you do have a long list of maybe 1,000 different laptops within this object type, it's very easy to search through those with this drop down. They also have an advanced search, so you can use that insight query language and write out that syntax line for more specific filters like date specific filters and things like that. So a lot of autonomy here and a lot of flexibility is very similar to how Jira is structured when it comes to kind of that Jira filtering system. Now, a couple other things that they have released recently is associating or pushing insight objects into the Jira automation engine. So you're always able to kind of leverage those objects, update those objects, edit those attributes on those objects with automation rules. So maybe we need to do regular maintenance on an asset like a laptop, or we need to regularly update the operating system object within our asset database. We can always have scheduled Jira issues that represent that maintenance, spun up on a cadence like monthly or maybe quarterly, where we dig into those laptops and update them. And so we can kind of tie in all those objects and assets into that automation engine and automate some of that process as well. So a lot of cool things coming out with Insight. They're really natively tying it into the product itself, trying to tie it into that automation engine as much as they can, really improving the importing functionality, which was a big pain point for the tool prior to their acquisition. So definitely keep an ear to the ground for all of those updates that are coming out on that public cloud roadmap.
The next topic I wanted to discuss is incident and change management within JSM. Now here from the customer perspective, we have additional request types and request forms out here in your service catalog dedicated to reporting an incident, as well as requesting a system change or a change to one of the services that you support. As you can see here, this is our report an incident form where you have several different fields that are required when you're entering an incident, like its description, of course, as well as urgency, impact, severity, and our affected services field, which is coming from the internal service registry, which is essentially a list of services that our support team supports through this help desk, which is going to allow us to select a very specific service that we're having an incident with. Now we also have a change management form, so a system change request. And this is actually going to be utilizing Atlassian's new pro forma product that they acquired quite recently. And the difference between a pro forma form and a normal JSM request form is that the pro forma forms have more dynamic functionality, like having dynamic dropdowns and entire sections of your form that are based off of a value within a dropdown. And we'll be able to see that here when I fill out this change request form. Now, Proforma also enables you to attach forms in the middle of your process. So in the middle of a JSM workflow, say when you already have approval, right after approval, maybe you need additional information, or you have a dedicated form for HR, or you have a dedicated form for security or finance, and it doesn't happen during issue creation, but it happens in the middle of the resolution of a request, that can be attached from the internal side, and we can show that here as part of the change and incident management process. Now, it also enables you to open up the form or the request, like this change request, back to the customer for editing. So if I was, requesting a system change and maybe I selected the wrong change type or the wrong change owner, or maybe I just needed to add additional information from the agent's perspective, that agent can select the form and essentially open it back up for editing for that end user, for that reporter of that request. Then here in the customer portal, after I've opened up this request, I can then edit those fields, submit the form again, which would lock it back down. So it's essentially a more easy way to give this back and forth between agent and end user without just having the comment stream, be that one mode of communication between them, and the only way for the end user and requester to add more information. So with that in mind, let's fill out this change request form. We're going to say, I would like to change content on the main website or something like that. Just to add video recordings of my awesome demos to our website, isostech.com. This is something that I would actually love to have, is this recording that I'm recording right now be on our website. So we're going to use a live example here. I have some recordings, JSM features we should be surfacing to our customers. This is something we're definitely working on. We just released our new website, so shout out to the new isostech.com. Go check it out. My videos will definitely be there soon. Then we're going to select a change owner. This is going to be, let's pick me. I'll own this change. The manager of this change, though, is going to be my boy Mitch here. And then this is going to be the field that the rest of the form is based off of. So I can select something like a standard change, and our standard changes have one additional field for me to select, like OS upgrade, password change, something specific. So I'm just narrowing down that type of change. This is essentially a sub change type. But if I were to select something like an emergency change, because this is a very critical high severity change that we need in the near future, we have additional fields for emergency changes that you can see here populated now that I've selected emergency change as that change type. And you can really do this with as many fields and as many sections within your Proforma forms as you would like, making them extremely dynamic and making them quite robust if you want to nest these further down. So I could select emergency change type, have these fields. I could have another drop down in the emergency change fields where I get to a sub emergency category that then needs more information. So we can really cascade this dynamic functionality and make sure that your change management forms are as complex as the amount of information you need to intake. I'm just going to go with a normal change here. which doesn't require any additional fields. It just states, hey, we need change approval board approval for this. And then I'm going to say, hey, this is going to be new functionality for us. That's the reason for the change. And we'll send in this form. Now, just like any other request, we're going to see all the details that we entered. It looks slightly different because I have this in a pro forma form and it says viewing form. And this is where that distinction is between me being able to re-edit and change values in that form and just being able to view it. And when the agent on the internal side needs more information from me or needs me to change information within the form, that's when they can select allow customer to edit basically, and this will now say editing form for me to come back in and change that. It also gives me the ability to download this into PDF format if I want to kind of share my form out with other people. And then the rest of this is going to look very familiar, right? The activity stream, the status that we're in, all of those normal JSM buttons that we have over here. Now on the internal side, for incident and change management, we essentially have dedicated queues for changes and for incidents here in the ITSM template. And we can have as many queues as we would like, but this is basically saying, hey, this is the category of requests that are going to fall into these types of queues. So within our incident queues, we then have specific granular queues to break up our incidents by status for the most part, but we could also break this up by priority of the incident, severity, impact. We can have automation rules that support something like a risk matrix where we contrast impact and severity and then assign a priority automatically or assign a risk automatically and then have queues based off of that risk or priority. So there are a lot of things that we can do to kind of build in your incident management process into your queues, into your workflows, and into those custom fields that you have as part of your incident management forms. Now, this is going to be our all open incident, so we can see that this is an ongoing incident. The change that we just entered, of course, is going to be over in our change queues, but let's take a look at our incident that we have here real quick first. And looking at our incident, we have urgency and impact. This is an incident that was about not being able to view some of the content on our new website. So you can see that Alana Grant here is having an issue with that. We can see it just came in. It's in the open status within our incident management workflow. But we do have a dedicated workflow for incidents, which is another thing that's going to make your incident management process distinct from normal service requests or distinct from your change management process that has an approval step. We have this incident management workflow that I created custom so that we could have a few different statuses representing essentially where the incident's at in its resolution. And this is going to be, partially on the development and the Jira software team's plate because, development root cause analysis here is something that's done by a developer that lives over in Jira software, over in a different project. So we can, just like we were mentioning before, utilize the workflow and automation rules to create linked issues at specific parts of your process, like development root cause analysis, to generate those issues, those stories, those bugs over in a software project so that work can be done in a Kanban or in a sprint in an agile environment by the developers and the users over in Jira software and still have this originating JSM request to reflect where we're at in the resolution of an incident. Now, the other part of that is oftentimes, especially if your team is following ITIL best practices, you are going to have customers report incidents, and then part of your incident management process is going to be doing root cause analysis, which in ITIL speak is really digging into the problem, right? And you want to have a problem issue type or a problem request type representing that problem management process. And so when we hit development root cause analysis, this might be when we generate a problem issue within our JSM project and assign it out to the person doing that root cause analysis on the team. Whereas if we're finally at the root cause analysis, we figured out what that root cause was, maybe our developers dug into the source code repository, found a recent commit or deployment that was the issue, and said, hey, this is probably the root cause of that incident that was reported by that customer. And now we are going to implement a change to fix that root problem. That's when we can have a status representing that part of the process and generate a change management issue out of our problem. So it can flow from an incident originating from the end user, from that form we just saw, into a problem when we get to the root cause analysis status. And then that problem can generate and link to a change management issue when we've identified that root cause and have decided that we need to make a change to maybe our main website, like this example is using, so that we don't have any more incidents with viewing content on our main website. We can utilize custom workflows and automation rules to flow work between issue types within the same JSM project, like incident to problem to change, or we can also utilize it to pass work to other teams, like within Jira software and developers working in their process. Now, incidents also have additional functionality that has been pulled from the Opsgenie product that Atlassian acquired a few years ago into Jira Service Management. And they're currently in this transition where they want to pull as much of that incident management into JSM proper as possible so that you don't have to jump between your Opsgenie environment and your JSM project. And so for agents, you have some new fields over here in the details panel specific to incidents. So this major incidents field is a toggle field that allows you to mark incidents as major simply by clicking that toggle. And now you have a major incidents flag on or tag on this incident, basically identifying it as an escalated incident. This way we can have dedicated queues, representing and reflecting our major incidents. We can have SLAs based off of it being a major incident. We can have notifications based off of that major incident tag. So this is something that we can leverage across the Jira Service Management product to essentially say, hey, these are the things we need to have in front of us and at the top of our queue because they are major, right? They are escalated. And more often than not, that is going to be a dedicated queue within the team priority queue that says major incidents or high priority major incidents. And we're going to put all of our major incidents into that queue, and we'll have a dedicated support agent or maybe even our help desk manager paying attention to those major incidents, clicking watch on those major incidents so they get notifications about them, and so on and so forth. Now, right below the major incidents, we also have conference call, which essentially allows us to leverage the Opsgenie functionality of spinning up a video and voice call. And this is going to ask for my microphone and video permissions, which I'm not going to give for the demo. But as you can see, they kind of have their own hosted bridge, which allows you to do a voice chat and channel. So you can essentially very quickly hop in with the rest of your incident management or operations team to discuss a major incident or an ongoing incident, over video and over voice. So very quickly, hop on that call. You can see that there's an ongoing call once you've started and hosted that bridge, and anybody can join in at any time, during that call, and you guys can, over the shoulder help each other out with resolving that incident. And then right below that, we have linked alerts, which is also another Opsgenie functionality. And our alerts that are flowing through Opsgenie are now visible here from your Jira Service Management product. So if there are other, main website related alerts that we want to associate with this issue, we type in, main website, we'll see those main website related alerts that have been opened up. Maybe I want to grab a couple of these because they are related to the incident that we're talking about. And then I can link those alerts to this incident to make them visible for anybody viewing this incident. And we can dig into those alerts, and the operations teams are now aware that there's an incident related to alerts coming from maybe other monitoring tools that they have integrated with their Opsgenie environment. And then finally, the last piece of Opsgenie functionality that they pulled into here is creating chat channels, which allows you to connect Teams or Slack workspaces so that you can very quickly spin up a channel dedicated to this incident, right? So as you can see, it populates a channel name based off of the incident issue key here in the JSM project. It gives you the link to that incident in the channel description. So we can basically set up war rooms on the fly for some of these more major incidents that we need to have a Slack or a Teams channel for. Now we of course have dedicated SLAs for incidents like we mentioned in the SLA section, and we also open this incident against an affected service. So we're obviously having issues with our website. So we selected that main website when we were opening up this incident, and we can see if we break down this main website that it shows one ongoing incident, which is the one we're currently looking at, ongoing for that main website. And this will tie into your change management process and really any other request that's opened up again against your main website service, because anytime the main website service is attached to a request coming in, you will see that there is an ongoing incident also associated with that main website. Now we can also click this investigate button. So another Ops Genie and really kind of a DevOps integration is being able to dig into the history of your main website and its source code repository that's associated with it. So our main website in our service registry has a Bitbucket repository associated with it. And that Bitbucket repository, as you can see, doesn't have a whole lot of activity. But if we get far back enough, we'll see some deployments. We'll see some commits here, and I'm hoping that I've got some commits in that repository so I can show you. There we go. And so we can actually dig into these deployments and these commits and see whether this might potentially be a root cause of the incident that we're incurring. So as we move back in time, and I think I have got some commits back here in the summertime when I originally set this up, then we can select those specific commits or select those deployments as a potential root cause for that incident. Oh, I might have gone too far. All right, we're going to use this deployment as an option, as root cause. So we just hit, attach it to it, and we can add this potential root cause, and then it'll show up down here in the potential root causes. This was a failed deployment, but it could be a commit, it could be a pull request, it could be a full deployment to your production environment. So whenever we updated the website last, within that source code repository, we'll be able to see those commits and then say, hey, this might be a potential root cause. And this is really more for, it's great for incidents, but also is great for those problems that you generate out of your incidents, because that's when you're going to do that root cause analysis. And that's when the developer is going to dig into those commits in their Bitbucket repository and identify those potential root causes. But your agents up front could, see that this incident came in 2 weeks ago, or came in recently, and you just hadn't a commit recently within your source code repository, and they can attach it and say, hey, this is a potential root cause. And then the developers can go in and dig into those commits and see if it actually is the true root cause of that incident. Now that's everything new for the incident management view within Jira Service Management. As you can see here, we do have dedicated queues for different parts of our process though. So all of our open incidents, whether DevOps is doing the investigation on it and we've generated a problem out of it, whether development is doing root cause analysis, whether we're documenting that incident. So a lot of different options here. These are as granular as the filtering system that we saw within the queues before. Now, moving on to change management and that change that we just opened up. Now, summary is going to say pro forma when you're using a pro forma form. That's something that we can customize and make sure that it populates the summary field with something more meaningful. But as you can see here, when I dig into this change that we entered at the beginning of the section, we'll see a dedicated area within the Jira Issue View called Forms. And this is specific to requests that you create with a pro forma form. And this is where you'll be able to add additional forms as well as download to different formats and reopen the form to the customer. And this is where you're going to say, hey, you guys can edit this. We need more information from you, within this form, or you need to change the information from this within this form. And then you can also utilize these forms on the internal side, right? So maybe as part of your change management process, your agent is filling out a change documentation form or some other kind of form. Or maybe during an HR process, your agents need to fill out specific information on the internal side. Well, that can all happen with a dedicated pro forma form, and you can have as many of these forms attached as you would like. So you can have these templated forms that you then select in the middle of your process or are automatically attached in the middle of your workflow, so that when that form needs to be filled out, whether externally or internally, it is here and attached to the issue. So change management and incident management are really dependent on your configuration, right? They're dependent on a dedicated issue type, dedicated request forms for change and incident management, dedicated workflows representing your process, and automation rules that support that workflow and automate that process as much as possible. Now, they are pulling as much change and incident management functionality into the cloud product and into this ITSM template as possible. And one of those new change things is a change calendar. And this is going to be based off of a handful of fields on our changes. So if we look at some of our changes here and we go to one that we created with a normal JSM form because it has these two fields, and then down here we see planned start and end date. These are going to be those two system fields that we leverage to extrapolate when that change is going to happen on our change calendar. And this is primarily for your agent team. Obviously, during your change management process, you're going to want to have a linked issue over in a Jira software project like we have here for that developer to actually implement that change. They might plan it through their sprint process. They might, have it on their Kanban board, but we can sync information between those two. And this is really just a planned start and end date. So this is to indicate, when the customer wants that change by, or when we see it fitting into our change calendar. And then the developer can, push back on that or coordinate with your agent to say, hey, the change is actually going to happen, between this time and this time because that's our tech window for our main website. And that coordination can, of course, happen, in the comment stream in the internal notes. And we can always update these fields. So if this change, hasn't quite happened yet and it's going to happen tomorrow morning rather than on the 10th, because that's when the developers say we've got our tech window for our main website, we can update that change timing very easily. And then over here in our change calendar, we will see that that change is now on tomorrow morning between 4 and 6 a.m. We can dig into that change, and since this change is against our Jira Service Management service, one of our services in our service registry, we can see ongoing incidents with that service as well, right? So if this change were to be against our main website, and we can switch that here just to kind of demonstrate and go full circle on this, and say, hey, this is also against our main website service. And then we look back at that change calendar here. Gotta refresh it. Then we'll see that ongoing incident that we have with the main website as well. And you can see this is the incident that we were viewing at the beginning of this section, having issues viewing that content on the main website. So if you do have changes that are planning to be implemented and you have ongoing incidents also against that service that is going to have that change implemented against it, those are of course going to collide, and you want to be aware of those. So your agents and other people can view this change calendar to make sure you resolve those incidents before trying to perform those changes. Now, a very new thing is post-incident reviews. And this is something that I don't quite have configured, but it's essentially a way to have a dedicated request type for your post-incident analysis. And this is something that primarily has happened in Opsgenie, in the past, but they are pulling this over into JSM just like most of your other Opsgenie functionality. So you're essentially able to create a post-incident review request type, and then we can generate that when your incidents are resolved, right? So that workflow hits incident resolution, you have that resolution state, and that kicks off an automation rule that creates a post-incident review, attach it or links it to that originating incident, and we can do incident documentation there from that new Jira issue representing our post-incident review. We can attach Confluence documents to that, and we have a dedicated queue section for that now within our ITSM style project. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about before moving on to the last section is kind of how we structure the project for incident and change management. I've been kind of talking about it and nodding to it every single time that I mention workflows and issue types, but the way that we have changes and incidents kind of distinguished between each other and between other requests within our JSM project is with the structure of our project configuration. We have issue types representing changes and representing incidents. And if we dig into our change management workflow associated with that change issue type, we will see a dedicated workflow for our change management process. We'll see a authorization phase, or status. That is actually an approval status for us. And approvals here in Jira Service Management are even easier to configure than over in Jira Software. Within your workflow configuration here, if you click on the status that you want to be an approval status, it'll have this nice little checkbox for adding an approval. You can then go into configure that approval, and this is where you can have a dedicated approver user group. So a user picker field, single or multi-user picker field. You can also have a group picker field. And so we've got a change approval board dedicated user picker field here that we leverage for our change management approvals. But we can also grab those approvers from our affected services because we actually have a change approval group attached to each individual service. And that's going to pull from your user groups within Atlassian Access. So we can have a main website change approver group, and then we can attach that group to our main website service in our service registry, which I'll show here in a second. And then we can decide whether it only needs to be one approval from that group, or 5 out of 10, a majority or something like that. And then we can also decide where this transitions in its workflow, if it's approved or if it's declined, right? So we're of course going to awaiting implementation if it's approved here with the approved transition, and going to declined status through the declined transition if we don't approve that change. Now jumping back to our JSM project here, the service registry is here in the operations section of the left-hand side navigation. And if we drill into our main website, we can kind of see the definition of our main website service. We can see that there are relationships between our services. So maybe our main website runs on Amazon AWS, so we're depending on our Amazon service, which is another service in our service registry. And maybe our main website is also integrated with Jira Service Management, so they're dependent on each other or used by each other as well. We can define a tier of service, so we can have 1, 2, 3, 4 tiers of service and base queues off of those tiers of service. We have an incident responders team, which is a Opsgenie operations team configured over in Opsgenie, so they're going to get alerts and notifications for any incidents that we push over to Opsgenie. So in the past, flagging or tagging an incident as a major incident was what generated an incident over in Opsgenie. We are now in this transition period, and Atlassian is having us create an integration connection between JSM and Opsgenie in order to push incidents over into Opsgenie for your operations team. In the future, that's probably going to change as well, so that those are more natively integrated, or all of the incident management functionality is over here in Jira Service Management, which is my guess for their future plan. And then the change approver groups that we have in here, if we go into edit this service, we can select that change approver group as one of our user groups within Atlassian Access. We've got a main website change approvers group here. And then finally, we also have a repository attached to it, and that's how we got to do that root cause investigation from our commits, from our deployments. We've got a dedicated Bitbucket repository that's attached to this main website. So each of your services could have a source code repository attached to it, and you can do that root cause investigation into those commits and those deployments within that source code repository. And then as you can see up here, we can also see those ongoing incidents that are opened up against our services from the service registry view. And that's really everything we have for incident and change management. Thank you for listening. We've got one more section coming up on automation and project settings and structure of JSM projects. So for the last section of our JSM comprehensive demo, I wanted to talk about the automation engine as well as essentially project settings and project structure within JSM. So first off, for automation, we're taking a look in the project settings under the automation tab here, where it still has the legacy automation, but also has the new automation engine that Atlassian acquired a couple of years ago and tied into all of their Jira products. So for the legacy automation, it should look pretty familiar for anybody that's been in JSM, but it's being phased out and it's being deprecated. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you do have automation rules within here, they've got documentation about moving these to the new automation engine. So definitely look for that in the Atlassian website if you are moving some of those rules. Now here in the new automation engine, you have project-specific rules, and you also have global automation rules, if you're at the right tier of subscription for their license. And global automation rules are very helpful and powerful because those are the ones that we leverage for any cross-project workflows. So whether we're handing work between two different help desk teams, or whether we're handing work to a Jira software team like developers for change implementation or incident resolution or problem root cause analysis, those are going to require global automation rules so that you can have a trigger from a request in your JSM project, then create an issue over in a Jira software project or a different JSM project. The global rules are great for anything that is across multiple projects. But within projects, you can also have a dedicated amount of project-specific rules that are meant to support your help desk and support your workflows within your help desk, and really just automate as much manual process that is consistent and standardized, with your help desk, team. So things like auto-populating the approvers field, based off of some of the incoming information on your requests. This is one that I created for a specific client demo that said, hey, we've got new software requests, and based off of the cost of that software, we have different approvers. If the software costs less than $10,000, then we have one set of approvers, or a specific approver like Mitch here. Or if the software costs between $10,000 and $100,000, we've got a different approver, right? And so this automation rule is really structured with a trigger, and then conditions, and then actions. And then you can also branch this into different conditions and different actions, right? So our trigger here is when the issue is created. We then branch into 3 different conditional statements. So based off of that software cost, we've got a statement for less than 10,000. We've got a statement for 10 to 100,000. And we've got a statement for over 100,000. And for each of those conditions, we then have an action beneath those conditions, which is editing the issue, specifically that approvers field, and selecting who that approver is going to be. So it's quite simple, and they have a lot of this stuff out of the box, so it's really plug and play for the most part. If we go to create a new rule and we want to select a trigger, you'll see that they have all of these nice built-out components. More often than not, it's going to be when the issue is created or when the field is changed, like if you put a tag on an issue or a label on an issue that you want to trigger an automation rule, say something like needs development, or incident, major incident, right? That flag that we have on our incidents, we can use and then say, hey, that's our trigger when that field changes. So it's very easy to grab one of these, when the approval is complete, or when the approval is required. So some of the new stuff that they're pushing into here, they're updating these all the time so that you have these nice plug and play components to act as your triggers. And some of these are going to be based off of SLAs. Some of the global ones are going to have agile specific things like sprint triggers, as well as DevOps things like version control here in our Jira software projects, or from our DevOps tools, pull requests being created, commits being created, really anything from DevOps all the way to our service management specific ones like those approvals. And we can get quite custom with this, right? Utilizing webhooks, utilizing manual triggers. So this is really just going to have a button on the Jira Issue View, so your agents can click a button and it automatically triggers one of your automation rules that maybe is more complex that you want to have as a manual trigger. So a lot of different options for those triggers. As our example, we'll just use issue creation. And then once you select that trigger, you can branch this into multiple different statements. So like we saw in that previous rule, or we can set a condition, and this is going to be opened up to your Jira query language. So as complex as that query language gets, you can leverage that advanced language to specify when an SLA is breached, or when an SLA gets close to breaching, or based off of a conjunction of multiple field values, right? So when severity is 1 and impact is high, we are going to assign a specific priority level, right? So we can kind of create a risk matrix out of multiple fields, which is a very common one, where we take severity and impact, and as a conjunction of that, we create different priority levels based off of those 2 fields. And that's really an automation rule that does that. We've just got branches for each of those combinations of severity and impact. And then the action is to edit the priority field for each of those different conditions, right? So this gets very, very granular, and it validates the query. So if I want to make sure I'm getting the syntax right, and I want to set this as priority greater than high, and I want to make sure that that's the right syntax, we can validate that query, and it tells you exactly how many issues are matching that Jira query that you've created. So even if you're not super familiar with Jira query language, they've got documentation on it supporting it. So definitely read through that documentation, as well as smart values and auto-populating here. So if we start typing in values, a lot of times it'll just auto-populate with some of the options that we have, right? So priority goes high and issue type equals maybe changes or something like that, and then we can validate whether that works. And it'll say, hey, no, you don't have a field called issue type. maybe it's only request type, or maybe I spelled issue type wrong, right? So very easy to kind of decide or determine whether your syntax is correct there on that JQL condition. But there are also other conditions, like a user condition. So a group of customers or a specific customer, if you want to have one customer have a different priority than another customer every time they open up a request. Maybe you've got VIP customers, and that group of customers is a condition so that you can conditionalize the priority of that group of customers, or conditionalize the queue that they fall in based off of that group of customers, right? And that wouldn't even take an automation rule. You can just customize that in your queues. But as you can see here, a lot of different options, if else blocks, and you have the Insight query language coming from your Insight Asset Management database as well. So if we want to grab something from our asset management database, like the laptops custom field, and then query those laptops and look for any issues that were created with laptops that need maintenance, as an attribute or as a status on that laptop, and then we can create a task internally for any laptops that need maintenance here on the internal side based off of that object within our asset management database and the attributes associated with it. So a lot of options for the condition, and then under those conditions, or we can just go straight to an action here. We've got a bunch of components for actions as well as Insight ones. So editing objects, creating objects over in Insight Asset Management, transitioning issues, editing issues, creating issues, very common ones. A lot of options here. You can manage watchers, which is a popular one for things like major incidents. Anytime an incident is tagged with a major incident, maybe we add our help desk managers as watchers so that they get those notifications about those major incidents. Maybe we send out Slack or Teams messages based off of that major incident tag, because we have those integrations configured as well. We've got JSM specific ones like approve or decline automatically, add service project customer, so adding a new customer to your service project based off of something coming in like access request to your JSM project, right? So maybe you've got a public facing JSM project and you've got a private one that you have to add customers to specifically, and part of that public one is a request to get added to that private one. This is a great component for that as well. And as you can see, it gets quite advanced down here with these components too. So a lot of options. It's essentially a trigger, condition, and action system, if then else conditional system within that condition component as well. And you can have as many of these automation rules as you would like. So if we look at the list here for some examples, they also have a library of built-in ones that are very, very common, right? So change management ones. When a change management request is created, then update the change type and the risk, based off of some information that they have within their form. Or when the low risk change management request is in review, then move it to approved automatically because it's low risk, and we'll just automatically approve any low risk change that we've decided is low risk, based off of an agent entering that field once that change has been reviewed, or once that change has come in. Prompt customer for comment. As you can see, there's a lot here just coming out of the box for very common rules. When you've created your rules, you also have a full audit log for everything that's happened on those rules. So configuration changes to those rules, who did it, when they done it, as well as execution of those rules, right? So when rules fail, when there are errors to execute that rule, then those will show up here as well. And you can kind of dig into the documentation of this, and they support this audit log with hey, what do those different statuses mean? Did it get aborted? Did it fail? Were there some errors? Is there an infinite loop that you've created within your automation rule that triggers itself or triggers another rule that then triggers it? So there's some really nice built-in management and administration of the automation engine as well to make sure that you're not creating endless issues within your project and creating a nightmare for your help desk manager. Now we've got some global rules here as well. The one I want to point out is this laptop maintenance task request or task creation rule. And this is utilizing that Insight query language coming from our asset management database. And it's on a scheduled basis. So this is for us to generate internal tasks for any laptops that have a maintenance date coming up in the next 2 weeks. So when that maintenance date hits 2 weeks out, we are creating a task within our JSM project to say, hey, we need to follow our protocol for maintaining a laptop. Maybe it needs an upgrade, maybe it needs an operating system change, whatever it may be. We can create scheduled internal issues to make sure that we're maintaining our objects within our asset management database or updating those objects or whatever that task may be. So we essentially utilize the scheduled component to trigger this, every day at 2:30 is how I have it set up. And then every day at 2:30, it'll look through our laptops, see if there are any that have a maintenance day of 2 weeks out, and generate that task when that 2 week period hits. So a very pretty simple rule, but it leverages that insight query language to grab our objects and our assets and query them as well. That's the automation engine that is in our project settings down here right under SLAs. Now, as for the rest of the administration of your JSM projects, they are structured very similar to any other Jira project. At its core, Jira Service Management is just like the core of Jira software and Jira Work Management. They have issue types and an issue type scheme associated with the project. And this is to determine what types of issues you have within your JSM project. So for our ITSM template, we get changes, incidents, problems, service requests with approvals. I added my own incident type as well to create my own custom incident workflow. And then, of course, the task for the internal tasks and the subtask layer for those dependent child tasks on your requests. And then for each of those different request types, we have dedicated workflows. And those request types could share workflows, but you can also have a workflow specific to each type of request coming in. But you'll have a scheme of workflows associated with your project as well. You'll also have screens associated with your project, and this is to determine what fields are visible on the create issue screen, on the viewing your issue screen. So those are in cloud your two primary screens. You don't have an edit screen on cloud because you can just edit fields on the view issue screen. But this is essentially saying, hey, what fields do we want to make available and required when we use this create button on the internal side? So when I'm creating an incident or when I'm creating a problem or a change management request, this is determining what fields we see here in this create issue screen, as well as what we see on that Jira issue view. And then, of course, the field configuration is determining exactly what custom fields, what system default fields you want to make available to the issue types within your project, right? So obviously fields specific to our Jira Software epics or our Jira Software bugs aren't going to be available to our JSM project. Those are fields that are configured and created at the global level within Jira Global Administration, but then we decide and associate them with our individual projects here, and that's what a field configuration scheme does. Now we also have components specific to our projects, which is another way to categorize requests coming in. If you have requests coming in against Active Directory, and Active Directory has a specific support team or automation rules that trigger off of it so that it goes to the software dev team that handles Active Directory, then you can have a component that is very easily attached to a request. You, of course, have roles and permissions associated with your project as well, a project lead, different project roles within your project settings, so that different people have different access and different administration or permissions to do things within your project. And so you can have these different roles associated with the different users at your project level, whether they're administrators, just collaborators, they're a customer of the help desk, or they're a service desk team member, so they're actually able to edit those issues within your service desk. You, of course, also have a full notification scheme associated with this as well. So as you have customer notifications, which are going to configure what kind of email notification and what those email notifications look like going out to your customers. You've got an overarching template for those customer notifications. So this is something that you can customize very specifically to custom HTML, custom CSS, and see what it looks like in plain text. You can also push variables into these templates so that you're sharing information out with your customers, as well as within that subject line, like the issue key here is by default, because that's what allows customers to reply to a thread through their email and have that attach as a comment on your JSM request. And that's really important for anyone allowing customers to open up requests via the email handler. That first request is going to generate a request. Any subsequent email to that thread is going to attach as a comment for your agents to see on the internal side, and any comment that your agent posts on the internal side is going to kick out an email notification on that thread, and that's the way it associates those comments to the request, or those emails to that request, is utilizing that Jira issue key. And you can customize the templates for each and every one of your customer notification events. And so they've got notifications that kick out based off of all these events that happen on your requests. When a customer is invited to the help desk, when they create a request, when they add a comment, when you add a comment, all that kind of stuff is going to kick out an email notification, and you can edit each one of these different templates for all those different events as well. Now, of course, on the internal side, you have your own notifications for your help desk agents down here in the notifications section, and this is going to allow you to customize what events kick out those in-app bell notifications up here, as well as which kick out email notifications to your users, to your assignees. And it's usually going to be people watching it and people assigned to it, but these events are also determining when you kick them out to the customer. So when an issue is deleted, reopened, created, things like that are going to kick out notifications. And this is a default notification scheme that we have associated to really every project within our Jira demo environment, but you can have dedicated notification schemes associated to different projects if you want to have different notifications for specific projects built out. Now, one major distinction I like to make when talking about JSM project administration is the difference between issue types and request types. And this is a very important distinction because an issue type isn't something that surfaces to your customers in that front-end portal that we saw at the beginning of our demo. The issue types are what is available to create request types out of, right? So our ITSM ones are change incident problem service request with approval. But we still have to create request types on top of those issue types, really out of those issue types, to populate our service catalog. And this is important because we want to be able to have multiple different types of service request forms that still follow the same process on the internal side, right? So our service request issue type has a dedicated workflow and it has dedicated fields associated to it, as we saw in that project setting summary. But a get IT help service request might have a different form for the customer to fill out than a fix an account problem service request. So they are resolved on the internal side in the same way. So we utilize the same issue type, but we want to collect different information based off of the different type of request that customer is entering. So getting a guest Wi-Fi account is going to have different fields available to your customer than that get IT help form, right? And so when we go to create request types, it'll ask us to name it. And we can say, hey, this is we'll just use demo tests. We can select an icon here. And then we can decide which issue type, so which workflow and fields do we want to leverage for this request type, for that form in that customer service catalog. And we'll say this is another normal service request. We'll select which group, so we can group those requests in our service catalog like we saw at the beginning. We'll put this in common requests and computers, why not? And then here in our request creation, we are essentially determining the agent view, so which fields we're going to see on that details panel on the internal side. So over here in this details panel, this is determining what we want to surface to our agents, as well as additional fields to them if need be. So we can drag and drop priority up here. Maybe priority is going to be of concern. Maybe we don't need our components. Maybe we don't want to look at those knowledge base articles for this one. So this is really determining what we're going to see over in that details panel for the agent view. We can also hide fields so that they don't show up at all. If impact and urgency and approvers don't matter to us, we can just start dragging these over here to the right-hand side. That way they don't show up at all, even down here in the more fields section. Once we've determined what the agent view is going to look like, we can save that and jump over to the actual request form. And this is where we're going to determine what that service catalog form is going to look like for our customer. We can add a description and say, hey, this is for demo testing. So that's the description that fits right under that form out there in the service catalog. If we take, actually, I shouldn't jump there quite yet. Let's keep filling it out and then we'll look at it at the end here. We can add help instructions. So, fill this out when you are doing a demo. Little help. It always helps to surface links here, documentation here. If you have a change management form and you want them to fill it out in a very specific way and you need a whole document to kind of support that form, you can link to your change management document process over in Confluence. That's public facing, or in your knowledge base that's public facing. And then once we have those descriptions in there, we can add the fields that we want to surface into that form, right? And this is going to be the fields that are available and configured for our service request issue type. So this list of fields is going to be different for our incident issue type, different for our change management issue type, different for each of those issue types we have associated with our project. So if we're only concerned with description, attachments, and priority here, we can grab those 3 fields. Of course, summary is always going to be in here because it's the title of that issue. And then we can customize what that display name of that field is. So rather than description, we can say, hey, this is describe your problem, right? So describe your problem field, we'll make it required, and we'll add additional field help text. So each field can have their own help text as well, and we could say, use this text field to enter more information. Man, I can't spell today. There we go. We'll update that so we can mark it as required or optional. We can add additional help text here. We can also update the display field for what it says to the customer. And then down here, we also have a hidden fields with preset values section. This is very often used for the assignee field. So you'll see it drop in there automatically. So obviously, surfacing the assignee field to the customer isn't something that happens all that often. You don't want them to select which agent is going to take on your work. But say that for this request type, we have a specific agent that always handles this kind of request, right? So maybe this is a get guest Wi-Fi access request, and Mitch is the one that always gives out guest Wi-Fi access. Then we can make him the assignee automatically anytime this type of request comes in. But we can do that with really any of our fields as well. And then finally, we can update what the workflow statuses show to the customer. So rather than in progress, if we want to say, working on it or something like that, if we don't want to surface, the name of our approval status, or in our incident management workflow, we don't want to surface whether we're doing root cause analysis or not. We want to change it to something else. We want it to just say pending for, 3 of our statuses that are part of our internal process. We can update what's shown to our customer. And then we can preview this in the portal. We'll see that this is our new demo request form. This is the description. We've got the summary field. We've got, the help text under our describe your problem field, and it's required. All those things that we just added here are here in the form. So it's really as simple as that, creating your request types. But I like to make that distinction because people really conflate and confuse what issue types are and request types are in the project settings. So definitely dig into that if you don't know. Now, the last couple things I wanted to talk about are some of these new tabs here in the project settings where you can select whether you want to toggle on or off new features within your JSM project. So a lot of that stuff that we talked about in the last section for incident management coming over from OpsGenie, your service registry, those alerts that you can link to it, the on-call schedule, as well as a lot of those new features. So different sections of your ITSM categories can be toggled on and off. If you don't do problem management and you only do incident and service request management or change management, then you can toggle one of these off and you won't have that dedicated queue section getting in the way when you don't use it. They also have a dedicated change management section of the project settings. This is where you can select and connect different deployment pipelines. So Bitbucket pipelines, Bitbucket repositories, like here's our main website repository we saw in that last section. We can connect as many of those as we would like, as well as additional CI/CD tools like Jenkins, Octopus. They've got a handful of tools here that you can leverage and connect to your different change management requests and change management services, really. And then incident management, this is where you're going to be able to say whether you want to see those alerts and basically automate the creation of those responder alerts over in OpsGenie on those affected services. So that incident responders team that we saw attached to our main website service, this is determining whether you want to enable alerts for ongoing incidents against that service into your OpsGenie environment.
and also where you connect that chat channel where you can spin up those war rooms for your incidents, right? So we've got Slack connected here. We can create a dedicated workspace for maybe our incident management team over in Slack. And that's everything I really wanted to cover. Each of these different sections has documentation on it in the Atlassian documentation portal, so definitely go check that out and dig deeper if you need more information about any specific part of administering your Jira Service Management project. Hopefully you guys learned something. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me through the whole demo. It is very long, I'm sure, but I'm hoping that we can break this up, especially on YouTube, so that you can kind of jump between different sections of our demo and kind of get a full idea of any specific topic that you want to dig into deeper. But again, thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. If you do have additional questions, email me directly. Contact us on our website, isostech.com. Email somebody that you already have a point of contact with on our team. But definitely reach out if you have any additional questions. Comment on YouTube. I will keep an eye on that as well. But if you do want to dig deeper on any of these topics, please contact one of our sales team members through our website. We'll get a call set up for you, and we'll be able to dig deeper and answer your questions over the phone, over Zoom, very easily, and we'll support all of that through your process. Thank you guys so much for watching the demo.